Episode 8, Teacher's Bet. Oh my god, that whole little situation where he's like, oh, Mr. Feeney's so predictable. It's just, I think that is just so funny. But like, it's good that they point out how underpaid teachers are, especially Mr. Feeney. Him being prejudiced against the scungy food in the cafeteria. It's funny because we see Topanga back in this episode. She's right in front of him. And it's funny that she laughs at his joke because the Topanga from the previous episode she was in, I feel like wouldn't laugh at that joke. So this is kind of where I feel like Topanga was a little more less hippie vibe, maybe? I like the whole interaction with Corey and Mr. Feeney in the classroom about making the bet because, again, it's kind of making Mr. Feeney a little more relatable. Like, I think this was kind of funny because he's like, okay, I'll be the student, you be the teacher. I love the whole interaction with, like, Eric and Morgan and Amy and the new girlfriend, Linda. Morgan, like, really steals the scenes in this whole, like, scene part. Like, it's just great. She's so cute and funny. I like that Morgan's all, oh, Linda, you're gonna fall for that one. He just wants to study with you. Right. Apparently racing is hurrying in a manly fashion. Did anybody try to do the math on that 1/5 of his paycheck if you made like $40,000 a year? Maybe $100, depending on how many taxes are taken out. Oh man, I think it's funny that Alan's like, why does Mr. Feeney want that bike? Poor Minkus, he's very concerned about Corey teaching the class. And then Topanga's like, hey, let's get rid of the dress code entirely. You're not going to come out naked, are you? It's just funny because I think future Corey would have appreciated that, and she totally wouldn't have. It's like, it's so funny how different she was in these early episodes to how she is even like in the next season. Poor Corey. His dad had to make him realize you don't get how Mr. Feeney scores. If he scores high on a curve, more kids are going to fail. Your bike is gone. And then Topanga went right back to her unique view of life. I'm channeling. Okay, present, but not all here, according to Corey. Mr. Feeney coming in the Phillies jersey with the baseball hat. Hey, dude, I was chilling with my homies. This is... It just cracks me up every time. You know it's bad when Minkus has joined the fray, pushed his desk out of the way, and he's bouncing up and down on one of those bouncy balls. It's like, yep, I think you might lose, Core. It's so interesting how they kind of lightly treaded around this topic of prejudice. They didn't say what they called Linda. They just said a bad name, and it's like immediately Corey got it, which of course could be a connection to the book he was reading. And it's very interesting how they always laid out these very important life lessons, and they did it in such a unique way that I don't think any other show really quite grasped. Like, they did it really uniquely, and it just was like, you always got the message, you know, in each episode. It was really wild. Oh my god, Mr. Feeney's also wearing 2 shirts. This is such a powerful episode, and once again, it's illustrated and portrayed and conveyed in a way that, you know, it makes an impact. It really does, but it doesn't do it in the normal way. Like, I don't know. Boy Meets World was always so amazing at getting their point across in this really unique way, and this episode is a really good example of it. And it's interesting because it's like Mr. Feeney is always like teaching, but this one was like almost like a lesson within a lesson. And full circle, they come back to how little respect and pay that teachers get, but they do it in a unique, humorous, you know, impactful way. Oh my God, I love the whole ending bet where Linda's in cheerleader and Eric's like, I got in on the ground floor. And Amy's like, oh, I was a cheerleader. Linda does the same cheer that Amy did after Eric berated it. I was like, that's great. So cute. Oh, and Amy was wearing two shirts too. Too much shirts. Okay, so my thoughts on the podcast. I've got notes. Will's voice really is everywhere. His voices are so great. He voices so many characters. It's so cool. The lesson in the lesson, I think, is a real point about this show that could be seriously in the synopsis for the show as a whole. It is the lesson in the lesson sometimes. And the first letter that Danielle read was awesome. And the second letter kind of got me welled up because the impact of Mr. Feeney is real. I have to say, like, Danielle being back in the show, like, on this episode, really leaves an impact. It really kind of changes the energy in the show for the better. I really love Lindsay Price as Linda. I really always kind of wish that she had been Eric's girlfriend longer, but as he said, it was a different girl every week. I am glad that they explained the lack of clarification on what the slur was, because it is something that I think always kind of left you in the dark almost. And it is funny to think that, you know, the money that the baseball player would have earned 30 years ago is like nothing now today. I always thought it was funny that Topanga laughed at the joke from Corey, but or laughed with the rest of the class because it really didn't seem like her. But at the same time, I do understand that Corey's the class clown, so everybody's gonna laugh. So I have to say, like, I think that Feeney switching roles with Corey is definitely the lesson in the lesson on this episode for sure. And maybe that was kind of like what Will said. Like, who cares if the rest of the class learned anything this week? It was all about teaching Corey. Or was Mr. Feeney just that good? And, you know, the naked comment from Corey is kind of interesting because, like, I do agree with Danielle. It is a natural response for a 12-year-old, for sure. And, you know, I always thought that Eric calling Morgan Wheeze or Weasel was really cute, but I do believe there's an episode coming up where she actually tells him she doesn't like it when he calls her that. So I think that's when it officially stops. And I guess I never really thought of the treatment that Minkus got as necessarily harsh, because Minkus always seemed to stand up for himself. He never really took things lying down. So case in point, when he decided not to help Corey, you know, he's like, why should I help you? And that's just it. He never really, I felt like he always stood up for himself, you know. But then, you know, they pointed out some people do treat other people differently in different settings or around other people. I did like the scene of Mr. Feeney and Sean playing cards. I thought that was really cool. Weird thing. So I really appreciate like actors that can really cry, because fake criers are very obvious and it's like a pet peeve of mine. So I kind of appreciate that they acknowledge that fact that Linda is definitely doing the real crying. Side yard, backyard, I believe that debate will forever rage on. And Meatloaf, Meat Feeney, hilariously confusing. I really kind of like that Indy was affected by that tense moment between Sean and Corey in this episode, because it really once again shows how this show really resonates even to this day of people of all ages. And even with Corey's speech, I mean, it's very deep, it's very powerful, and once again, resonates today. You know, it's interesting because is this like one of the only times that we get really any kind of backstory on Betsy? Because we see her, oh, I used to be a cheerleader. And, you know, it got me thinking, we really did not see a lot of backstory from her, if any at all, really. And I'm just like, man, I have to agree that was kind of a missed opportunity. I have to agree, Will was definitely channeling Michael J. Fox in this episode, and I loved it. And I kind of wonder if Sean's whole wearing the same clothes vibe was to kind of start, you know, building out that world that, you know, Sean's family wasn't as financially stable as others. And I think my ending note is just Will not really knowing how to use a computer just tickles me so, because I love him. He's so hilarious. But that's it for me on episode 8. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll see you next week.